Just waiting for it to get loaded over. Which is funny because with the delay, it's probably already live.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know why this is taking so long to load, but yeah, they're just loaded now. So pop back over to the Zoom meeting. Get this set up, and I'm just gonna share this out off my channel here. Oh, I got it. Oh, should be live. Yeah, they're just loaded now. Oh, shoot. That's on your account. And I have to do this on my phone. 1 second. Sorry, Steve.
Hey, I'm good. All this computer stuff and buttons and
Oh,
everything.
I can't believe I can actually pull this off by using just a cell phone. Like all of my editing, all of my stuff is literally done off of an off-brand cell phone.
Oh, that's great. You have to do what you got to do, and necessity is the mother of invention and all of that. I've got a few few things going on here, an older computer and some other stuff. So we're all hanging in there and doing what we can do, and we get her done.
Yeah. And it's crazy how far this has come in such a short time. So
You get a lot of views.
I do okay. Like I've had some that actually get a lot spiked up. Like I've had some good ones. Um, okay, so that's been shared out. I gotta get back to my chat. 1 more second.
So how many shows have you done?
This is number 35.
Awesome. And it's an
Yeah.
hour long?
An hour and a half if you're
Hour and a
uh,
half would be good.
yeah. All right. So we're live now, and thankfully nobody was in the chat to see that. So um just for my audio, I'm gonna like wave at the camera and then I'll give a proper introduction and we'll go from there, okay?
Okay.
Welcome everybody back to the After Dark Show. I'm Don Rogers. I'm really excited to have with me tonight. He's an author, he's a lecturer, he's a researcher of a subject that actually just really sparked my interest lately is the Great Pyramids of Giza. And he's going to share tonight with some of his research and his findings and understandings of how the Great Pyramid was built and some of the inner workings of the structure and some of the falsehoods that are accepted as well in, I guess, modern Egyptology, would you call it? Um, but yeah, tonight's guest is Mr. Stephen Myers, and thank you so much for reaching out and joining me on the show because I'm sure this is going to be fascinating because I've heard a couple of your interviews and they're really compelling. So thank you again. Do you want to give everybody a brief overview of what got you interested in what you're about, and then we'll get into some questions?
Well, I'm kind of a rather technical guy. I have a ham radio license and the FCC commercial radio class license and other technical degrees and that type of thing. So instead of like swimming or hiking, I like technology, if you will. And if a person likes technology and history, I like history. So ultimately, they'll probably at least inquire about the Great Pyramid. It's a 45-story skyscraper that was built in ancient times. And, it's quite interesting and all of that. So 30 years ago, before the internet, I was interested, go down to the library, uh, read a book or two by experts, Egyptologists, and they tell a big story about a ramp, that was probably larger than the pyramid itself. And these workers with strong back muscles moving 70-ton stones up this, ramp and everything. And I thought, oh, okay. hey, they're experts. But there's a little dirty little secret about Egyptology, and that is they do not do demonstrations. They're science that does not engage in the scientific method. They've never moved a 70-ton payload 1 inch or lifted a 70-ton payload 1 inch, never moved even the size of a casing stone of the Great Pyramid, about 16 tons on or off of a barge. So they definitely have a story. And so then I looked at all sort of alternative ideas about the Great Pyramid being a death ray or confirming Bible prophecy or pointing to stars for some esoteric reason, to make us all feel good or whatever. And then I found this privately published book by a guy named Edward Kunkel called Pharaoh's Pump. And he talked not about religion or the language that was spoken in ancient Egypt or the hat the Pharaoh wore or anything like that, or gods. He talked about how the Great Pyramid was built and why it was built. And it was very compelling. A lot of people haven't read that book. But I became, interested, and then it all became a life quest through the years. Started a nonprofit foundation at thepump.org and written several books, 3 books so far, and ended up on your show.
That's awesome. And for those who don't know, can you give us like a brief description, or actually, it doesn't have to be brief, but a description of the construct of the pump and like what exactly it is? Because, like you said, a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to read that book. And for myself, like I said, this just came across my desk. It just sparked my interest. So that's why I really wanted to talk to you and like get into the inner workings of what exactly the pump is and the lock system and everything that would be involved.
Well, the Great Pyramid, we think, wasn't a tomb for a pharaoh. I asked people, how do long open passages and doors on pivots or sliding stones, how does that protect the pharaoh's carcass? And you never get a coherent answer for that. But we think instead of being a tomb or any of that other stuff, that it was actually a machine that was infrastructure that actually helped the people that built it. The Great Pyramid was built at a huge cost, but it had an even bigger tangible return on investment. And how it was built was we think that they used water locks like those in the Erie Canal or the St. Lawrence Seaway up in that part of your part of your area, and or the Panama Canal water locks and barges. And they systematically moved stones up to the building site. And the first stones they set in place, this is very abbreviated, but were the casing stones for the bottom layer of the Great Pyramid. So they had a square wall about 4.5 feet deep. So that allowed them to fill that enclosure with water. Those stones are still cemented together watertight with a strong bonding agent. So up on the construction site, there was a square pond about 4.5 feet deep. Well, they had water locks from the Nile River all the way up to the construction site, so they could, with ease, effortlessly move these massive stones up these water locks in a production-like manner, and then fill that pond up with stones, if you will. So they take them off the barges into that pond, and then when that was done, the first layer of the Great Pyramid was completed. And then the next thing they did was put the next layer of casing stones on top of the ones that were already there. And the process continued, added another water lock to communicate between this series of locks from the Nile all the way up to the second level. And they kept that pond full of water and systematically, with ease, 24 hours a day, they moved stones on barges all the way up and fill that pond up. And the process continued. until the Great Pyramid reached to the sky. So that was a systematic and effortless almost process that didn't require strong back muscles.
I actually have a couple of questions. You were saying earlier that the casing stones were like 16 tons. Do you have any ideas on how those were made? Like, because I know like there's a lot of like misinformation. We don't know, or they do know what technologies they did have access to back then. Because like creating something that square and that big is a phenomenal feat by whomever did it. And I would just wondered if you could share your thoughts on how they would make these casing stones.
Well, there's a lot of controversy about how the stones were cut, is what you're trying to get at. And some people say they were poured like concrete, if you will. I think that they were quarried and cut to extreme precision. They had surfaces that were about 5 by, depending on which one, about 5 by 6 or 7 feet that are within 1/50th of an inch. So Egyptologists know how it was done. They had chisels and hammers, and then they just and they had a whole bunch of people. You increase the input with these chisels and ham and make casing stones. But guess what? Egyptology has never made a casing stone like those at the Great Pyramid in the last 200 years. They've never done it. And Egyptology has never made a single surface of a casing stone in the manner they say it was done. My understanding of how those stones were cut is greater than the entire science of Egyptology, because I know that it can't be done using hand tools. But how it was done is a different manner. You're correct. It's phenomenal, large scale, highly precise stone cutting is not something you can do by scraping it with your fingernail or just having workers do it. If you go to a machine shop, you see very few workers, but these machines producing the extreme precision. So I think they had some sort of a machine, probably water powered, and a system to cut those stones both effortlessly and quickly. So that's the best I can do. I don't know how it was done, but I do know that how it was not done. And the entire science of Egyptology is wrong on that regard.
I think you're onto something there. I actually have some experience. When I was much younger, I worked in a flagstone quarry in Ontario, Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you it takes tremendous force to lift these things and cut these things, and they were nowhere near the size of what's in Egypt either, like what we were cutting and moving. So there's definitely some technologies that haven't been discussed or discovered yet. I don't think it's a stretch of the imagination to say they had things that we are not aware of yet.
Oh, that's you have a very good open mind. The direction of research I'm following, a lot of people reject it outright, but the people that it really resonates with are people that work with their hands, stonemasons, people that work in quarries, people that work in shipyards, car mechanics, people that know what it takes to actually do something, construction workers, that type of thing. Egyptologists, usually the biggest stone in Egyptology an Egyptologist has ever moved is the one in their kidney. So they aren't they aren't very competent in stone moving or even understanding it or appreciating it. It takes a lot to move massive stones, and that's true of any payload. In the United States, they made the Erie Canal, and it is 4.5 feet deep. Has the barges had a capacity, or originally it was enlarged, originally of 70 tons. So, you know, instead of building the Erie Canal, which was the most expensive construction in the New World, by immigrants, let me put it that way, by the Western, if you will, by the non-indigenous people. It was at the time, the most expensive project. But why didn't they just drag the heavy payloads like when they built the Great Pyramid? I asked people, why'd they spend all that money to build the Erie Canal? And so people, but people don't look at it that way. They just, oh, it must have been a ramp. Well, where's the demonstration? Oh, there is no demonstration.
And I was going to ask when you were talking about the barges, do you think, like, and this is strictly your opinion and just from what you've learned, do you think there was different sizes of barges? Because I was just picturing it as you were talking, like you're going to need different sizes of barges as you're going up as well, right?
Yes, the mass majority of the Great Pyramid is stones that weigh 2.5 tons. You know, less than 100 probably stones are the large 50 and 70-ton payload stones. So yeah, they had different barges that for different sized stones, and they also had specialized barges to move and manipulate these stones. Like we have forklifts and that type of thing. They had specialized barges that they used in the assembly process. They also had two large boats that were in boat pits right next to the Great Pyramid. And we think they were used like floating cranes to move the smallest stones, which are the weight of a car. Nothing small about them, but they could lift those off the barge by having the barge connected, if you will, with a rope to those stones. And the people would walk to the front. They would connect the stone and then walk to the back, and that would tip the barge and lift the stone off the barge faster than you could describe how it was done. So it was, I think, a very fast process because it went 24 hours a day and with ease. Nothing to do with massive back muscles. We have a video series on our website at thepump.org, which depicts how the Great Pyramid was assembled, all the important processes, and moving different large stones and like the stones of the ceiling of the King's Chamber and everything else. So they can see that for free on our website.
That is really cool. Um, I'm going to rehash a question that I actually watched in your interview with what the frick. Do you think that the pump was used to create electricity? Because I loved what you had to say on that.
Well, I think the Great Pyramid served a single purpose, like a hydroelectric dam or a nuclear power plant, or even a highway. Let's say cars go up and down the road. That's part of infrastructure. And a hydroelectric dam, all it does is make electrons go through a wire. And the Great Pyramid, all it does is pump water, if you will, elevate water, pumps it up. But the use of that pumped water could be varied. It could be, power heavy machinery. The Industrial Revolution started with hydropower, if you will, up where there's in the New England states and that type of thing. They had a lot of streams and flowing water and run mills and everything, so they could use it for that. Also, compressed air, they could make compressed air. And with compressed air, you can do a lot of scientific experiments, that type of thing. With a Venturi and compressed air, you can make extremely cold area and an extremely hot area, both. So you could temper metal, or you could actually temper metal with freezing. They probably did a whole bunch of other things. Scientific and medical is my my research indicates. So there's a whole host of things that they did. And with that, I see the Giza Plateau originally as a science center or industrial park, more so than a graveyard, if you will.
And that's actually something me and my coworker were discussing. Her and her husband were watching something on the pyramids, and she thought it may have actually been you that she was watching. But they were saying like how there's never been bodies found in the Great Pyramid. It's not a tomb.
Right. Well, that's true. That's evidence. There, you can have different interpretations of that evidence. Egyptologists, this is what they say. Well, the pharaoh and his golden treasure was stolen by thieves in antiquity, and so we couldn't steal it here, by ourselves. Us Egyptologists couldn't steal it. So because there's no evidence that it was a tomb, then that means it's a tomb. That is their reasoning. But it's not a tomb. If you go to the Valley of the Kings, which I was just there last year leading a tour, uh, everything has writing on it, religious writing and hieroglyphs, the ceiling, all the walls, it's all written. And if you go to the tombs, it's got writing all over it. I mean, the Egyptologists had a lot to, or excuse me, the ancient Egyptians had a lot to say. Everything is written on it, all over, writing all the way up to the high columns and the ceiling and everything. But you get to the Great Pyramid, it is devoid of any formal writing, and that's evidence. So you inside a machine, you don't need a bunch of writing. Inside your car engine, there's no writing, maybe a few part numbers, but they don't have to tell you anything inside the cylinder of the of your car engine. So it's completely different. It's the Great Pyramid is a ultra modern with no ornamentation and oddly configured passages and chambers. Egyptologists say, well, they didn't know what they were doing. That's so they were building this great tomb, but they had many changes of plans because they didn't know what was going on. And I, in contrast, think that whoever built the Great Pyramid knew exactly what they were doing. It was finished, including the subterranean chamber. It was finished to be a functional machine that actually helped people in the real world.
And that was one of the next things I was going to ask. We were talking about how it was functional as like a possible energy source. There are some people that think it is to harness solar and cosmic energies as well, almost like what Tesla had in mind. Do you think there's any fact in that or possibility that it was an energy device for cosmic energy or solar energy as well?
No, uh, actually,
Okay.
uh, like a hydroelectric dam gets its water from weather. So a hydroelectric dam is actually a solar powered device. If you want to get really technical, really deep into it, so that's, the water has to get up above the dam to go through the dam to make electricity, and it does that with the sun for weather. But there's a lot of talk about pyramids associated with Tesla's research, but it's interesting to know this, that there's no a reference available of Tesla ever writing about pyramids or talking about pyramids. The word pyramid is not in any of his patents, never went to Egypt that we know of. And so this idea of Tesla and pyramids seems to be a growing modern day urban myth, not based on any real reference or grounded in any type of, you know, reference that is associated with Tesla. So that's a problem. And actually, their explanation of how it actually was like a cosmic collector. How that worked is hard to fathom.
Yeah. Um, Something I've seen you mention, a time or two on your social media page is the Orion correlation, and I'd love if you could give an explanation of what that is for those of us that don't know, and just let her rip on your opinion of it.
Well, the Orion correlation theory is a self-professed theory about the Great Pyramid and other pyramids in general, and how they are associated with the constellation Orion for various reasons. And people, that's very popular right now. A lot of people like it. 100 years ago, there was and for centuries actually, there was another Great Pyramid correlation theory that preceded the Orion correlation theory. That is the what I call the biblical correlation theory, pyramidology, which uses correlations between the Bible and the Great Pyramid to confirm Bible prophecy. Very popular theory even today by religious zealots, but it has lost favor. That Great Pyramid correlation theory, focusing on the Great Pyramid and the Bible, it has lost favor because it is founded on a series of logical fallacies and invalid research methods. So that's what has invalidated the biblical correlation theory. Well, lo and behold, in modern times, that rejected theory has been replaced by another correlation theory, the Orion correlation theory, and that theory has a lot of logical fallacies associated with it, including circular reasoning and correlations without causation. Also thinking that math validates a correlation, the numbers match up somehow, and that type of thing. So that's, in the real world, that doesn't fly. If you have a couple of if you compare two things and the numbers match up, it means nothing unless there's a third piece of evidence, causation, that ties those two things together. And they think because the vents point to something, then like the stars, then that's was intended to be significant. But the stars are pointing, the vents are pointing to different stars now. Every 72 years, the sky moves 1 degree because of the precession of the equinoxes. So they're precisely pointing to different stars now, but and every hydroelectric dam on Earth has passages that point to stars. So, and all the spikes in the crown of the Statue of Liberty all point to stars. And but this just to say all of these things um, is very spooky in terms of being research instead of religion. So I ask people about, if I can, I ask people about, well, the research methods, not the correlations, but how they are developed, these correlations, how they're determined to be valid. And they say, well, the numbers match up or whatever. But they've cherry picked two data points, two ideas, two, pieces of information, and then just say they're related, like the speed of light and the coordinates of the Great Pyramid. But actually, the speed of light is only one number, and coordinates is two, longitude and latitude. But they don't care. So anything on that same latitude, if you will, is correlates. But I tell people, well, the numbers sort of match up, but what they're trying to tell us is the number of days in a year, but they got the number wrong. And they say, how do you figure that that's what they were talking about? And I say, well, how do you figure they were trying to compare the Great Pyramid with the speed of light? And they say, well, the numbers match up. Well, all all invalid correlations are generally precise, if you will. There's four sides of the Great Pyramid, and the Beatles had four members. Wow. Shazam.
Yeah,
That's a correlation.
Tower.
But
yeah.
there's not, it's mathematically precise, but it's not valid because it has no causation. And each Beatle was the singer and played a musical instrument. So they were faceted, you know, in two. They had two facets. Well, each face of the Great Pyramid has two facets. The ancient builders were telling us in this symbolic way about the Beatles. And people say, well, a pyramid has a fifth side, so that doesn't even hold true. And I say, haven't you heard of the fifth Beatle? Everyone's heard of the fifth Beatle. And guess what his name was? Pete Best. Which pyramid is known for having the best foundation, the Great Pyramid? I mean, it's just, and you can go on forever. I'm writing an article about the correlations between the Great Pyramid and Elvis Presley. Both of those two things have a lot of data points that you just cherry pick and come up with some horseshit explanation, and then you have a correlation. And that's what has done with the biblical correlation theory and also the Orion correlation theory. So I have on my YouTube channel, I have several videos that describe in detail why the Orion correlation theory is in crisis and is facing rejection.
You mentioned something there about it having five sides. When I was preparing for this interview, I just kind of like went into every direction I could possibly find. And there's a couple that I want to ask you about. And I'm going to try to keep a straight face when I get your answer. Um, what is your take on the Great Pyramid being nine sided or even an icosahedron?
Good. Sounds good to me. No, the actually it's built on bedrock. Okay. It does have a base. It's built on bedrock. So I mean, people just come up with that type of stuff. They also come up with it had a gold capstone. Great. Is there any evidence to support that? Nope.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of strolling and I saw that one. I was like, oh, but you actually touched on something there is the science versus the dogma. And it's something that I keep coming across in a lot of the things I've been researching, like esotericism and religion and all of these things. There's always this science versus dogma. And I think that really does relate to this as well. Like there there's no discovery when you're just accepting what the guy who got paid to say something says.
Well, my opinion of Egyptology is very low. To be an Egyptologist, you sit in a classroom and listen to what an Egyptologist tells you, and then you agree with what he says and you become an Egyptologist. Egyptology has devolved into a mystery religion, a cult, if you will. And it's a stagnated science. All other sciences, if you read a book 50 years old, I don't care, math, physics, astronomy, astrophysics, all of those things have changed by leaps and bounds in the last 50 years. But you can get a 100-year-old book written by an Egyptologist and it's exactly the same. So it's a stagnant religion. It is in crisis because it doesn't use the scientific method. I mean, and the purpose of the scientific method and science is to transcend or get rid of all of this controversy about all anything associated with the Great Pyramid. There's no controversy at all about the various hardness of different types of rocks. They use the mole hardness test. They take two rocks and they rub them together and they can determine which one of the two is harder. No big controversy. There's no ancient aliens telling us all about rocks hardness or anything. That's that is the beauty and the value of science. It's wonderful, but you don't get that from Egyptology, and you certainly don't get that from the Orion correlation theory with its collection of logical fallacies and all of that. So there is a lot of dogma. Max Planck, a great scientist, is attributed with the saying that science doesn't advance by, discoveries and that type of thing. Science advances funeral by funeral. And these scientists get dogma. And then once they finally die off, then science can advance. A good example of that is the Piltdown skull. The Piltdown skull was discovered, and the best anthropologists in the world, oh, it's valid. It's there it is. It's right there. It's the missing link. They couldn't even see because of their preconceived notions and what they wanted to see, but they couldn't see the file marks that are visible on the on that artifact, the Piltdown skull. So they, oh yeah, 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 yeah. Well, it took 40 years for anthropology to say, well, the Piltdown skull isn't really valid. And what actually happened was all those anthropologists that wrote their doctoral thesis, it took them 40 years to die off. And then the next generation of anthropologists never did think the Piltdown skull was valid. So no scientist changed their mind at all. It was just dogma that was transcended by death. And that's what we're doing right now. We're waiting for more Egyptologists to die off, if you will, and loosen that stranglehold of their narrative that they've come up with that doesn't have a lick of scientific demonstrations to validate.
I think that's an amazing explanation, and thank you for that. Now, what I've been kind of excited about, because when we were preparing for this, we ended up having to change a day, and then something came across my desk, and I'm going to read it and try to not screw up the name. But in I don't know if you're aware of this one, but it was what came across to me was in 2019 an investigation in Khufu Harbor. I hope I said that right,
Mhm.
of the geochemical traces of metal contamination dating back to 3265 BCE, showing that human occupation and metalworking abilities were more than 200 years before they're previously believed. So that, if you want to throw out random correlations, you're talking about the advanced technologies that they would have needed to be able to do the things like these lift locks and cutting the stones. I think that's absolutely amazing that they're proving that they had metalworking technologies. That probably means they had some very advanced equipment.
Well, I think that people are people. It's a constant, from 10,000 years ago up until now. People are people. And there aren't any dumb civilizations out there. They had some rather sophisticated technologies in ancient Egypt. They had birth control. They did C-sections. They had medicines and did agriculture and certainly metalworking. If you go see King Tut's mask, brilliant, and some other things. King Tut's dagger is said to be made out of meteorite. So yeah, they were sharp cookies. In South America, they had terrapanning, which is the brain surgery. Lots of skulls have had holes cut in them, and from the skulls they can tell that they lived, because they started to heal and that type of thing. And so that's pretty sophisticated. And they had a whole host. A lot of our medicines come from South American plants in America, in the United States, or in the modern world. The doctor tells you take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. Well, aspirin originally came from a plant in South America. So the witch doctor said, chew the leaves and call me in the morning. So that's where we get a lot of our medicines and that type of thing. So no, there are no primitive cultures, and people are the same around the world. All of us, we all want what I would call prosperity. We all want prosperity, which means we're going to eat today, and we know we're going to eat tomorrow, and our kids are going to be have a safe place to stay, and our kids are going to eat tomorrow. And if you got those things, you got prosperity. So, but we're in the Western world, we're drowning in prosperity. So people think, oh no, they built that great big thing to point to a star. Oh my Lord, how sad. What a small return on investment for such a big project. And we build hydroelectric dams or even sewer systems for cities. Huge advantages to these types of infrastructures. Abraham Lincoln had a son, a child that died from drinking polluted water in Washington, D.C. So they didn't have the infrastructure we have. And so it's all valuable, all of this infrastructure in the Great Pyramid, I think, was that type of infrastructure that provided prosperity, irrigation year round, powering machinery, and all of that. How interesting it is to me that in the world right now, the largest water pump is in the Valley of the Nile. It is the Mubarak pumping station. And in modern times, in the Valley of the Nile, they need a massive water pumping system. And I think in ancient times in the Valley of the Nile, they needed a massive water pumping system.
I I think that's true too. Um, do you want to take everybody through what your books are about? Because you've written several books on this subject, and I would just love to for people to know what's available and what your books are actually about
Well, I've written
in
three
your
books. The
theory.
first one is Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, and it describes specifically how the Great Pyramid was assembled, how big, massive payloads were moved from one place to another, and how the Great Pyramid rose to the sky. So, if you're interested in the assembly process of the Great Pyramid, that doesn't involve a ridiculous ramp and big back muscles, then my first book is for you. And then my second book is about how, or actually why, the Great Pyramid was built. And it was built to provide a huge return on investment. And it describes the water pumping process in detail and explains, the enigmatic features of the Great Pyramid and the function they provided in the water pumping process and other related issues. So how it was used, how it was delivered to the point of use, and that type of thing. There around the Great Pyramid, there are a lot of very large excavations, like 30 feet square that go down 100 feet. And we think that those housed some of the machinery or some other technical um, activity going on. Then my third book is a little bit more technical than the first two. It is a analysis of Edward Kunkel's book called Pharaoh's Pump, and our nonprofit foundation is named after that book, Pharaoh's Pump Foundation. So that talks about that book because it was privately published and all of that. It needed to get more exposure and to describe what he was talking about, but also talk about the advances in his direction of research. So those are three books so far that, and they're all available in Kindle ebook format. And the first two are available in softcover if you're interested. So that's nice. The links are on my website at thepump.org. where you'll find more information about my activities, our foundation's um, research and goals. And you can contact me through the pump.org. Email works best.
Um, can you actually get more into the inner workings of how the pump itself worked? Because I'm just fascinated with them having that type of technology back then, how they would raise and lower the water levels, and like what was it a stone sewer system, like a plumbing? I'm just the mechanics of it are fascinating me.
Well, I do have a video series, our second video series about the workings of the passages and chambers and how they function together to pump water, and that's at our website for free. But the input for the Great Pyramid water pump was the upper end of the descending passage. It's the opening on the side, if you will, and that's where water entered the Great Pyramid. And it went down into the subterranean chamber, and that chamber is very oddly constructed, and we think that it was built to utilize the force of implosion that Victor Schauberger, an Austrian naturalist, discovered and used in a whole bunch of other devices. Victor Schauberger, or word search implosion, that type of thing. But anyway, from the subterranean chamber, water went up through the grotto, and there's valves and stuff and other things going on, but it went up through the grotto into the lower end of the Grand Gallery. And we think in the Grand Gallery, they used electrolysis to separate oxygen and hydrogen from the water. And those two gases are rather volatile if they are ignited. So they when you ignite them, the result is a vacuum, believe it or not. And vacuum is a powerful force. And on YouTube videos, there's a bunch of people that use the oxygen and hydrogen ignited in an enclosed chamber, creates a vacuum. Well, that vacuum in the upper end of the Grand Gallery helps draw water up in the Grand Gallery, and through mechanisms of automatic valves, that vacuum is broken, if you will, and allows that big column of water, probably 300 tons, that water piston to move down, and it moves water into the Queen's chamber. And that chamber is about half full of water. The upper half is air. So it compresses the air to a high degree in that chamber. And ultimately, water moves up into the king's chamber, and it's half full of water, half full of air. And the water entering that chamber compresses the air, and that compressed air pushes water out of the king's chamber vents, which exits the Great Pyramid water pump. And it's pretty involved, but no more involved than a V8 engine. And then from there, the water has a pretty high head, if you will, and we think that there were passages that went into the casing stones that are gone now, down to the base, and then they could have powered machinery, generate electricity, use the water for irrigation and a number of other purposes. So it's all described in my second book and my second documentary about the workings of the Great Pyramid water pump.
That's actually right where my head went as you were describing that. It's like that would be a wonderful setup for like a turbine or energy system. You you've got that compressed forced water, and all you would have to do is put turbines in there to conduct electricity. So yeah, that I was following along as you were explaining that, and it's like,
Right.
oh, okay, yeah, I see.
Interesting, isn't it? We think that this unique and certainly much different technology that we have could be developed, redeveloped actually, and used in to help our modern but very troubled world. It would be an alternative method to generate electricity using coal-fired or fossil fuel generators for electricity or even hydroelectric dams all have environmental impact that is negative. So we want to develop this alternative water pumping technology. And you don't need a big stone pyramid. You can use polypropylene enclosures, PVC pipe, some off-the-shelf parts, some custom fabrication, that type of thing. We do have a facility that we're working on redeveloping this ancient technology to both validate this direction of research, but also to help people in the modern world. Every day, twice as many people that died at 9/11, which was just a couple days ago. We just celebrated it 2 days ago. Anyway, twice as many people that died that day die every day because they don't have clean water to drink and they can't irrigate their crops. But this is a technology that can be used in third world countries that would help, alleviate that problem. So we're a humanitarian organization as well.
You had mentioned there about them using it for irrigation. I was wondering what your thoughts on that were, and then my wife actually has a question because I'll jump in on this. We were actually living in Ontario, and there's a lot of lift block systems, and actually in Peterborough, Ontario, they actually still have a hydroelectric dam that still supplies exactly what you're talking about, right? So these things are still in operation in rural areas in Ontario. Like, so I know they're legitimate and power sources.
Yeah, they are.
Um,
It's interesting.
yeah. Uh, Crap, I forgot the first part of my question. Oh dear.
Sorry, that's all I needed to.
Yeah, you made me
Normally
squirrel, and I
people
forgot the
ask,
first part of my question.
Normally people ask, well, they have a yearly inundation. Why do they need a water pump? The water's right there. That's a good enough question. Well, in a hot desert or even in a savanna, a one-time unpredictable yearly flood isn't satisfactory for year-round irrigation. And it wasn't then,
That
and it isn't now. Uh, they they built the High Aswan Dam, largest structure in the Valley of the Nile, bigger than the pyramids. They built that, which stopped the yearly inundation, but they can use the electricity to irrigate year round. The High Aswan Dam is kind of the keystone of a huge irrigation system that is powered by hydroelectricity. So they even the Lake Nasser, if you will, behind the dam, flooded several very significant ancient sites. And the reason why the powers that be decided to flood those sites is because the irrigation was more important. So, you know, um, a couple of them were moved, some were inundated, for eternity, but they needed the year-round irrigation first over those important ancient sites.
that's actually where I remembered the question I forgot was, did you think that the Great Pyramid was related to the irrigation or an aqueduct system for irrigation in ancient Egypt?
Yeah, it certainly pumped water, and like I say, you can do a lot with pumped water. You can power machinery and all of that, and irrigation. It's also been noted that just recently there's been a previously undiscovered branch of the Nile that goes right along where the pyramids are, if you will. And there's much more talk now about barges and canals than there is about this mega mythical ramp that Egyptology has made up. So people say, well, how did they get water to the Great Pyramid? Well, there's a canal, or excuse me, there's that ancient, now dried up branch of the Nile that goes right there. So there's some corroboration. There's some interesting discoveries that lend credence to this direction of research. And another thing I'm trying to do is acknowledge that the ancient people in the Valley of the Nile were geniuses, if you will. They had a high understanding of the physical world around them and physics and electricity and electroplating and stoneworking. So with those and chemistry, and with that high knowledge, they were able to build this infrastructure that improve the quality of their lives and the quality of the lives of their children, again, in a tangible way, not religious or anything like that.
You touched on higher knowledge there. Um, when you say that, do you think that is like arcane knowledge, a knowledge gifted from gnosis, like from source, or an extraterrestrial knowledge? Where, when you say higher knowledge, where do you think they obtained these abilities and this understanding?
Well, I say a higher knowledge by meaning that they knew things higher and more sophisticated than we know, if you will. A fifth grader has a higher knowledge than a kindergartner. So I don't think that's what I was trying to get at. Certainly there's things
Yeah.
we know that they didn't. I don't know, Oxycontin probably. But or how to pollute the Gulf Coast of the United States with oil. We know how to do that for our energy systems. But they probably understood technologies, developed technologies from their very sophisticated understanding of physics and that type of thing. And so that's what I was getting at. Before Tesla, we didn't have alternating current, and he was a gifted man, and now we do. But I don't think it was ancient people. You see a lot of ancient alien stuff. There's a lot of proponents, and we're getting kind of strange here, but there's about 6 human races, about 54 alien races, if you will. You got the Greys, you got the Nordics, you got the shift changers, um, the reptilians, and on and on and on. Well,
Yeah.
let's say 56 races that exist. What's the one race we know didn't build the Great Pyramid? That would be the African race. They say, well, the African race, they couldn't do it. Those people, those ancient people in the valley, so it must have been aliens. So there's a very racial or racist component of this ancient alien stuff. I really do. I think the ancient people were geniuses. And if they needed if if they needed alien technology or alien help in any way, then that means they were too stupid to the ancient people. They were too stupid to stack rocks on top of each other. But I have a very high opinion of ancient human beings and high respect for their abilities that could benefit us in our modern world. That's just my take
I
on it.
I I actually completely agree with you there too, because I think we've had several things removed over the last several hundred or thousand years of our own abilities and intelligences, and it's that goes into a whole other rant about the system and the things that we've been enslaved with. But no, I do think they were far more intelligent and had a lot more ingenuity than we even have understanding of, even in our modern times, with things that can create algorithms. Like, we don't have equipment that can lift some of the things that have been lifted now. Like,
Well, it's just the the presupposition or the motivation to build things now, let's say like hydroelectric dams or nuclear power plants or computers or software, and the people that do it, the motivation is to make money. And Tesla, he figured out, oh, well, we can just transmit power and there won't be a meter to charge people. And as soon as that became apparent to the funder, then then he lost his funding for developing that technology. So, but maybe the ancients didn't have that type of financial motivation. You know, all of our energy systems in the modern world, like oil and even hydroelectricity and other things, are very concentrated, owned by the few that make a lot of money that cost to us people um, quite a bit, you know. And you know, we if there was a system to have electricity, but you don't pay an electric bill every month, then the powers that be, oh, we don't like that system, you know. And the high price of gasoline, when gasoline is real expensive, that's good. That is very good for somebody, not us,
Yeah,
but somebody else. You know what I'm trying to say? So that might be
I
the underlying motivation for how our technology works, but not the ancients. And they had a different priorities, different ways of thinking that were certainly more environmentally friendly, more you know, equal for all the citizens and that type of thing. So we'll see. We're in a revolution of ideas, both in terms of technology, in terms of transcending Egyptology. You know, this latest correlation theory is in crisis, and I'm actually against the next Great Pyramid correlation theory, whatever they make it up to be it with rainbows or human anatomy, or they compare the Great Pyramid with anything you want. So I'm against that, but it's a revolution of ideas and things are changing. I don't know hardly anybody past the eighth grade who's looked into stone cutting, you know, like you, who
yeah,
believes Egyptology stories that they put in books in the 21st century, you know, and
yeah,
you know how Egyptology validates their interpretations of the evidence. They use unanimity of expert opinion. In other words, they all think alike. They all agree that it must be right, so that validates it. Isn't that sad?
well, it is. And if we're gonna do a bingo card on the next correlation, I've got Flintstone style dinosaurs. I'm thinking they went like brontosaurus straight up and put them all on top like that, and Fred was on the back, just rocking. I think that's how it
That's the
I
thought.
made
Yeah,
a
the
proposal.
dinosaurs and giants, got to have them giants in there. But all
Yeah,
of that is both of those are kind of what I call the strong back muscle theory. Big rocks,
yeah,
you need big back muscles. There you go. But
yeah,
people lift battleships in the Panama Canal by turning a knob.
yeah.
So it's all very interesting. Again, revolution of ideas that's going on, and there's people that think that the Great Pyramid it was some kind of machine. There's different directions of research, and people are examining all of them to get an idea which best fits the direct physical evidence, that type of thing, and you know, people are learning research methods a little more now instead of just believing what they're told. You know, these correlations aren't evidence. These correlations are an interpretation of evidence and are certainly subject to scholarly debate.
Well, and the chamber buoyancy explanation that you gave is probably the most logical thing I've ever heard in regards to the construct of the pyramids. It makes the most sense to me rationally, right?
I
I
appreciate
do have
that.
a wonderful imagination, but I have that logical sense too. This just makes sense.
Yeah, it's okay if a theory makes sense and is consistent with physics and the direct physical evidence. So I appreciate that, and the interest is very high these days, as opposed to you know in my research, I've done a lot of talk shows, and the interest is just building instead of people saying, "Oh, it was some sort of a woo-woo thing, or it was a solar thing, or Tesla power, or whatever." And so there's we're getting all down to brass tacks and kind of transcending all of that, the numbers match up and all of that. So it's an exciting time to be a researcher.
It it really is, because there's a lot of things that are just coming out very rationally. Like it just things are all of a sudden making sense. Like I've known about the pyramids since I was in public school, but this is literally the first thing I've heard about it that it actually made sense. Because I'm not going to lie, in grade 8 when we were talking about it, I saw the pictures of the dudes pulling the thing, and I went, "That's dumb," right? Like, I
It
didn't
is
know how
dumb.
it was done. Like, right?
Well, there's two things. Egyptology has not demonstrated the what they say they know how it was done, and Egyptology cannot demonstrate it. Can you imagine if somebody came up with a cow jump over the moonology? And they talk about cows jumping over the moon. You can see illustrations of it. It's in literature and mythology and that type of thing about cows jumping over the moon and all of that. So someone would say, "Hey, can you demonstrate a cow jumping over the moon?" But somehow Egyptology gets away with it. The richest science in the world with all of their museum space and all of their departments of Egyptology in universities like the Boston University. Shame on you, Boston University, for having that outdated uh, idea with that's totally unscientific. Shame on you. You are horrible for having a Department of Egyptology. That actually, I think, decreases the value of all the degrees the Boston University hands out because they still have a Department of Egyptology. That would be like having a Department of cow jump over the moonology. But uh, science progresses slowly, and usually the last people to figure it out are the scientists themselves, like the people at with the Piltdown skull. Everybody knew it, and finally the scientists had to, "Oh, I guess it isn't true," but everyone that thought all of us scientists died off, so it doesn't matter. And all of those people had thought the Great Pyramid confirms Bible prophecy. Most, not all, of those people have died off. So, uh, you know, dying off is one of the greatest uh, ways to advance science.
So sad.
My wife's like sitting there going, "That is so sad, but it's so true," because
This,
the
yeah,
people who paid for it to be one way are gone, right?
that's right. Yeah, it's sad. That's the probably one of the best examples. But there was also in anthropology the Nebraska man. They found a couple of modern day pig teeth, if you will. Oh, that's that's Nebraska man, and there was a whole big deal about it. One of the arguments for teaching evolution in schools, the old those trials. What were they? Um, oh my, it escapes me. Um, where they had these famous trials in the 20s. Much of the proof of Egypt of evolution was this Nebraska man that they discovered, but it was all false. It was wrong, every bit of it. So it's funny. It is really funny. But science advances and truth ultimately does come out. And it's a battle. It's not just build a better mousetrap and they will come. I mean, everybody edit Nikola Tesla was fought tooth and nail with the current wars, if you will, between AC and DC, and it was a battle for funding. He's Tesla, one of the greatest minds in the world, spent about 10 years in quarries with a sledgehammer, busting big rocks into little rocks. And a great mind like him, and couldn't couldn't teach or anything. And then he also died penniless in his motel room. So the world is very unkind to brilliant people, and it's just the way it is. But people march on, and people transcend, falsehoods, and they end up in the ash heap of rejected ideas. Sciences come and go, and it's again the most exciting time to be a researcher right now than it has been in a couple of 100 years.
I I like that. Um, Before we get going, do you want to tell everybody, just give them the full spiel on your website, because I've been on it and there is a lot, and you definitely want to let everybody know, because this is something you should check out if you're interested in this subject, because there is a lot of information.
Yeah, I am the founder of a 501(c)(3) nonprofit foundation called the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation, dedicated to keeping the direction of research of Edward Kunkel alive and furthering that research. And we are have activities. We have a research center, a facility for experimentation, and we're doing the best we can. We have a board of directors and pro bono legal counsel and some other people that are donating their time and energy. We even have a guy in the neighborhood who's a good welder, and that's so much more valuable than having an Egyptologist in our in our midst. So we have a library as well. And anyway, we've done a lot of things, but we are developing the best we can, redeveloping this ancient but very high technology of pumping water to help our modern but very troubled world. We have my book links, my email information, it's upcoming activities. We have two video series that used to be on DVD, but a lot of people in the third world couldn't afford it, so we just made them free as a series of YouTube videos, and how the Great Pyramid is built and why. We also have on my YouTube channel a bunch of other bits of information. One video is titled "Is Egyptology a Pseudoscience?" And you can watch that, and I've gotten a lot of response from that. And the logical fallacies of the Great Pyramid is described in much more detail, and a few other things. So hopefully people can, instead of just um, rejecting the whole theory or the whole research, they can like read a book. That's how the revolution will happen. Not just saying LOL on Facebook or anything, but read a book, learn something in a little bit of depth, and find out about it. I actually have studied the biblical correlation theory about the Bible and the Great Pyramid, because we all know that's wrong, that's ridiculous. But if you can articulate why those correlations, those precise correlations are wrong, that will help you articulate why the precise correlations of the Orion correlation theory are also wrong, because they use the same flawed research method. So, that's why I talk about that rejected theory, because it's the same thing, but a little different window dressing as the Orion correlation theory. But anyway, so there's a lot of information, and Facebook page is on the a link for that, so people can instead of watching game shows or another sports football show or something, they can maybe get on the internet and view our website and find out what we're about. If you have a question, ask me, and someone will get back to you as to a question about the research or anything like that. So hopefully that'll help people get an idea of going to that gateway of all of our information is at our foundation's website at thepump.org.
And thank you so much. I'm going to grab all of your links right after we get out of here, and I'll put them in the description of this. And when I upload it to audio on Forbidden Knowledge News, I'll put them in there too. So everybody can just click on it and go right to your page from there. Like I said at the top of the show, I am still running off of a cell phone, and I don't know how to end a show without just hitting end. So I'll get a hold of you in a minute on Facebook. But thank you so much, Stephen. This has been a great hour of information, and I actually want to talk to you again, but just in private about ham radios because I have questions. But
Great
yes,
hobby.
so thank you again. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you
thank you
again for
very
being
much for
on.
having me on the show, and I hope we can do this again sometime in the future.
Oh, for sure. I would love to sit down and talk with you again because this was awesome. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and go